As a student of yoga, you're probably practicing downward facing dog countless times. Even if you're using good, accurate techniques, by focusing on the exact same techniques every time you do the pose, you're probably running into diminishing returns. Similarly, as a yoga teacher, I know if I give the same 4 to 7 cues every time I teach downward facing dog, I'm gonna start to feel really stale in my cueing. We are gonna look at my 5 favorite ways to focus on different aspects, elements, or attributes of the pose and create some really essential refinements. We are not going to overhaul the pose from beginning to end. We're gonna take the same pose that we're doing, the same structure with the same fundamental techniques, and we're going to refine them. By bringing our awareness to 5 different techniques, we really start to see the different possibilities that we can experience in this posture. This is one of the reasons, everybody, that education is so important as teachers and as students. Education just opens up possibilities. It gives us a more complete and analytical framework to understand what we're working on, and it gives us more options and opportunities. My name is Jason Crandall. I've been an internationally respected yoga teacher, teaching at the world's most prestigious conferences and festivals for over 25 years. I built this channel as a reference for all of us as students and as teachers to provide the things that I wish I had known earlier in my teaching career. For those of you that want to go even more deeply into study, I have an incredible set of online courses, both long form and short form, everything from 200-hour trainings to 300-hour trainings to continuing education in everything from anatomy, sequencing, teaching beginners, and injury management. The first enhancement of the posture that we're gonna make is to increase the anterior pelvic tilt of the pose, creating more strength in the hip flexors and quads, and likely a little bit more length in the hamstrings. It's important to remember that downward facing dog, or the action of the pelvis in downward facing dog, is an active forward bend. So we don't want the pelvis to just kind of be there. We want to be creating this tilt. To do so, everybody, we're going to start in downward facing dog, then we're going to lift the heels up as high as they go. Keeping the heels up is going to give us a little more wiggle room. It's going to make it a little bit easier to rotate the pelvis. So we lift the heels, we keep the legs straight, and we cue the action of drawing the hip points towards the front of the thighs, or tilting the front rim of the pelvis towards the front of the thighs. So you're rotating the pelvic rim towards the front of the thighs, you're lifting the sitting bones, you're lifting the hip crease, all the while the heels are lifted. In doing so, engage your quads. Now you're gonna find that you and your students can engage the quads more readily when the heels have this elevation. You keep all of these actions, you will feel this, and then lower the heels down and back once again. The second thing we're gonna do is put more length or more stretch into the calves. All of us, myself included, can be way more dynamic in how we use the foot, the ankle, and the lower leg. So to get the calves to get a little bit longer, we want to produce more action in the front of the shin and in the front of the ankle. And to do this, we're going to do something pretty counterintuitive and not super fun in the short term. In downward facing dog, you're going to start exactly like you just did in that previous option. You're going to lift the heels up as high as they go. Then, once the heels have lifted as high as they go, now we're going to tell our students to drop the heels as low as they go and to lift the toes. Then what I ask people to do is, as those toes are lifting, to imagine the ball of the foot is like a foam roller and that we're rolling a little further to the back edge of the ball of the foot. When people do this, when you lift the toes and create the action of rolling more towards the back of the ball of the foot, you're going to create a greater, deeper hinge in the front of the ankle. You're going to create more dorsiflexion, and this is going to really lengthen the calves. Now, keeping these exact same actions, you can bring the toes back down, and we sustain the technique. The third option is to create more engagement and more length or more stretch in the outer hip muscles, specifically your abductors, especially your gluteus medius. Now, everybody, I think this is one of the most important elements of the pose that is very rarely understood and even more rarely taught. So we're not gonna change the elevation of the feet, but we're gonna be in downward facing dog. And what you wanna do in down dog is you wanna have your students, or if you're just practicing this, obviously just you, look at your feet. And then as you see your feet, root down more firmly through the base of the big toe. And as you press down through the base of the big toe, create the action of the 2 feet pulling apart. I like to tell my students to imagine you're widening your yoga mat with your feet. So you create that action of pulling the feet apart, and where is that actually coming from? That's actually gonna be coming from the outer hips. Essentially, it's a way to create more isometric engagement of the gluteus medius, okay? So you create this action of pressing the ball of the feet down, especially the big toe, pulling the feet apart like you're widening the mat, and then everybody, take your awareness of that same action all the way up to the top of the thighs and follow it. Create the action of widening your thighs apart. Also, you might notice for many of you, you get even more anterior pelvic tilt because this same technique is probably gonna help you work the tensor fasciae lata more, and that helps you with the anterior pelvic tilt. But you're gonna feel this in the outer legs and especially in the outer hips. The fourth option, or the fourth way to improve and get more from our downward facing dog, it's to experiment with shoulder rotation. Now, I have my preferences. In down dog, I prefer a little external rotation to the humerus, but I have to tell you, the more I've really learned over the decades, the more I realize that you can vary the action of internal rotation or external rotation depending on your body type and what you're looking for in the pose. So to do this, everybody, I actually find it's best to focus on what the hands are doing because hands obviously are ultimately connected to the shoulder. So you can experiment with creating a little bit of internal rotation of the upper arms in down dog by, with your hands, gently squeezing the yoga mat and creating the action of turning the hands towards each other. Now, I don't want you to move the hands in real space. I want you to imagine you're just gripping down like you're holding lids of jars, and you're just kind of turning them in. This is going to create a little bit more engagement in the internal rotators of the shoulders. For some people, this is gonna feel a little unpleasant. It's gonna feel like a little tense, a little tight in the sides of the neck and not feel great. But for others, it's gonna feel really nice. It's gonna feel stable. Now, the other thing we can do, which is more common, and it is my preference, but I'm open-minded, is to create a little bit more external rotation to the upper arm. Again, I do not find the best way of doing this is to just focus on the arm. I think it's a little bit better to focus on the hand because the hand's in contact with the ground. So it has that direct feedback and resistance that we can work with. And the hands are obviously directly connected to the shoulders, especially when the arm is straight. So to focus a little more on external rotation, you're just gonna root into the floor, into your yoga mat, with your fingers, slightly grab the mat, and then create a lateral rotation. Rotating the hands away from each other as if you're twisting the mat outward is gonna go straight to the shoulders. For some people, it's gonna feel open and spacious and lovely. For others, it's gonna feel a little disconnected. So experiment, explore, and find what works for you. They're both mechanically equally legit. The final technique to take advantage of is gonna help us get more from our shoulders. It's gonna help us get more scapular protraction or broadening. And for most people, a little bit more flexion to the shoulder and extension to the thoracic spine. So in short, it's just gonna open up the shoulders a bit more. This is different than what we just did, which is to experiment with rotation, but these two can go hand in hand. So whatever rotation you prefer, you can use that rotation while applying the technique that we're gonna focus on now. What we wanna do to create this kind of enhancement of shoulder and scapular mobility is to start in down dog and then come forward into plank. Now in plank pose, you're gonna press the floor away from you and broaden the upper back. I want you to press the shoulder blades or press the floor away from you and allow your upper back, encourage your upper back to broaden laterally. That feeling of broadening is the shoulder blades moving away from each other, and that's the necessary, desirable motion of the shoulder blades in downward facing dog. So we get this broadness in plank, and then we keep that broadness and really slowly sneak back into down dog. We want to sneak back into down dog nice and slow and focus on that width, that action of the scapula wrapping and those scapula broadening away from each other. Now, to get a little bit more motion of shoulder flexion, we can take our hands wider than shoulder width apart and we can slightly turn them out. Now, as we do this, we press the fingertips really firmly into the floor and we allow the chest and the shoulders to go a little bit lower, as if the chest and the shoulders are moving gently towards the legs and towards the floor. So we have increased scapular protraction, we've increased shoulder flexion, and we've increased thoracic motion, especially thoracic extension. Now, here's the caveat to this. This is active and this is dynamic. This is not dumping. We aren't unintentionally just disengaging muscles and sinking into the shoulders. Everybody has really dynamic, nuanced, complex shoulders, and some people's shoulders in downward facing dog benefit by this technique where we open up that range, but some people feel better and benefit from a little more conservative range in the pose, okay? So I want you to experiment with this in your own body. I give it as an option in my students all the time, but I always kind of throw in, as I do with so many techniques, if this feels good and open and spacious, great, it's working for you. If it feels unstable, if it feels pinchy or awkward, it's not working for you, pull back a little bit more. I know at least one of these options, one of these enhancements or refinements in downward facing dog is gonna be really nice for you and your body. Enjoy it, experiment with it, incorporate it, play with it. Those of you that are teachers, share it. One more thing before I go. Those of you that enjoy this channel, subscribe, please, like, all that stuff. It's helpful to me. Those of you that want a deeper connection, both to the methods that I teach and to an amazing community of students, those of you who want to learn and grow a little bit more, I have exceptional online courses. They're all in the link below. I'd love to help you continue to teach and just really enjoy the experience of being a practitioner and as a student of yoga. As always, everybody, thanks a ton for your time. I appreciate it. Take care of yourselves and each other.